By the time I was 15 or 16 years old, I had come to the conclusion that God was something that humans had made up for the purpose of giving us some type of hope after death and restraining the young from immoral or unethical decisions. This perception of mine, this opinion of mine, was something that I had come to primarily because I had witnessed people who said that they believed in God. I was a high school student, 15, 16 years old, and had friends that attended church youth groups and those types of things. Knew adults that were consistent attenders at their local churches. And that my experience with these people was that their behavior was really not all that different than my own, even though that I had not ever really attended church. I had no real experience with these types of things, and nor did I accept the fact that God was in some form or fashion informing my decisions. What I recognize is that me observing people who say that they believe in God to understand who God is actually something that is a piece of the scripture. It's something that we're supposed to be doing if we say we believe in God, that our lives would demonstrate who God is. Unfortunately, people are at times very bad at doing this well, at actually showing and being an example of who this God is. Not that long ago, I was actually with my family at a sporting event, a local sporting event, and a person that I knew was very active in their local church and was pretty outspoken happened to be there. And I saw this person's interaction with the crowd of people that was there to watch the sporting event, and I recognized just how brash and actually flatly rude this person's conversation was. And I thought to myself in that moment, wow, it's amazing to me that somebody who calls themselves a Christian is interacting with people in this type of way. What I want to focus on today is not so much on all of the failings of people, but rather who is this God that we are supposed to be representing if we are a believer. I'm thankful because God has revealed himself to us. He's shown us who he really is, even if we as people who say that we are following him have done a poor job at being an example of who he is and his character to the world. So I want to take a look at a text in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, one of my favorite pieces of the scripture. Just to kind of set up where these people are, God had developed a family, had picked a family out that he was going to show himself and bless the whole world through this one family. They ended up finding themselves in Egypt, and over the course of a couple of hundred years found themselves enslaved to the king of Egypt. While they were in slavery, the king, Pharaoh, got very scared of them, and so he started to oppress them in some pretty incredible ways, most notably that he tried to kill off the young boys to try to suppress the growth of the population of Israelite folk, the people of God. Inside of that world in which the young boys were being killed, our hero of this particular story comes to birth, that Moses comes to be, and he's saved and spared from death because his mother and daughter place him in a basket and place him in the Nile River, and that Pharaoh's very daughter finds him in the water and spares him death because she feels sorry for him. He's raised in the Egyptian court and all of the prestige and wealth that goes along with that, but that there was some type of tug in him that continued to move him towards seeing Israelite people and their suffering. Through a course of series of events, he finds himself as an exile in the desert east of Egypt, meets his eventual wife and his father-in-law, ends up having a couple of children, and kind of settles down and finds a decent job tending the sheep of his father-in-law, and that's where we pick up our text in Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. I don't know, because of the distance of time between this event with Moses at the burning bush and our day, that if we completely understand how absolutely just huge of an event this would have been to Moses, we can get caught up in the fact that there was a bush on fire that wasn't being consumed, and surely that would have been an incredible surprise to Moses. But it isn't just the fact that Moses saw this vision of God that would have been surprising. It would have been the very words that God spoke to him that would have been an absolute shock. Quite frankly, it would have been a shock for people all the way up until the days of Jesus, really another 2,000 years after this situation with Moses, that people would still have heard these words and would have been absolutely floored. And the reason why is because God had come near. You see, Moses growing up in Egypt, and the gods of Egypt were distant. It's the reason why Pharaoh, who was the representative, the official representative of this god, lived in a palace separated and remote from the people, is because the gods themselves were separated and distant from the people, and that they understood that the gods of their world really only showed up at specific moments of their lives, birth, death, maybe a couple of other key moments in their lives, that the gods showed up. But that here was this God, and there was something profoundly and uniquely different about him. The character of this God was different. We see it right in verse 7 of chapter 3, when God says about the four things that he has happened with his people, that he has done with his people. He has seen their affliction. He sees them. He hears their cry. He knows their suffering. And he's coming down. Again, I can't stress how absolutely mind-boggling this would have been, that a God would have been that concerned with people, that he himself would come down to rescue and deliver people out of their suffering. To kind of put this into perspective, to think about the gods even a couple of thousand years after this in the Greek pantheon of gods, the famous philosopher Epicurus mentions that he believes that the gods are real, but that they have absolutely no dealings with people. They're separate, and their only concern with humanity is that the humans would suffer and the gods would not. And that the purpose of humanity is then to eliminate suffering, a very Buddhist idea, in fact. You see, the God revealed in the scripture, the God who we are to represent, if we are going to have the name Christian, is a God that is intimately aware of people and their suffering. He sees them for who they really are. He actually hears them when they speak and cry out to him, in that he has drawn near and knows just how much they hurt and are in need of help. You see, this is the God that we who bear the name Christian is meant to be representing. That is who we are meant to be an example of in our world. And if you are a person who has been hurt by people who claim to be Christian, and they might even be sincere, people that say that they know Jesus, and maybe they do, but that you have been hurt by behaviors or situations or conversations that you have had with them, my guess is it's probably because they haven't taken the time to really see you, or to really hear you and to know who you are and what is going on in your life. And I'm here to tell you not to give up on pressing into the God who does see, hear, know, and come to you. So this is the amazing thing. In verse 10, we reference that God sent Moses as his human representative to Pharaoh. But you see, that wasn't good enough to just take another human that also is hurting and broken to be God's representative, but God did something unique 2,000 years later, 3,500 years later. That he himself came in the flesh in Jesus of Nazareth, walked on the earth, heard and felt and experienced the suffering of humanity himself, dying on a cross for us. This is the God that I invite you into journey with. Allow yourself to recognize that people are flawed. We're hurting, we're broken too, even those of us who know the Lord. And don't let those experiences hinder you or stop you like they did me from pressing in to know who this God is. So I encourage you, continue to watch the videos that are associated to our channel. Be on the lookout for people that are willing to sit down and talk to you about this God. Read the scripture. Pray. He longs to journey with you